Welcome to What We Made Possible, the podcast where we explore the power of healing and driving change for advocates, leaders, and change makers. The conversations here draw the connection between creating new possibilities in the world, possibilities of care, of belonging, of thriving for our communities, with stories of personal healing and loving relationship building. I'm your host, Patty Dayleg, leadership coach for social change. I spent a decade in nonprofits, government, and DEI, securing 6- and 7-figure opportunities for communities of color. And I've experienced firsthand the transformative power of compassion, healing, and belonging in making a bigger impact. Let's dive in. Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast. So today's episode is a really special one. It's actually a conversation that aired on Transit Thursdays, which is a podcast hosted by the brilliant Didi Paterno, and I'm thrilled to share it here with you. So Didi is not only a friend and a former coaching client, but she's also someone who holds space with a lot of care and a lot of depth. Didi is a Vedic astrologer. And in this conversation, she turned the tables and she interviewed me. We got into some big feelings, some big truths. We talk about what it means to find light in the midst of loss, how growing up in a multi-generational Filipino household shaped my values, and what it looks like to be rooted as a Filipino American in spaces that don't often feel like they're made for us, right? So I opened up about burnout too, the challenges of advocacy work when I was in it, the power of mentorship, and the power of community, and how that has helped me personally. And this episode is pretty tender. It's an honest one. I share some stories that I never have. So if you've ever felt stuck or heavy, or if you're in a season of searching, this one is for you. And I hope it feels like a warm hug. Hope it feels like a deep exhale. Let's dive in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Finding Light in Loss series of Transit Thursdays. And today I have a different guest. I'd like to introduce Patty Dayleg, who is my former coach, and I like to say in the dark times, in my personal dark ages. She actually was one of the key people who helped me find light in loss. She's founder, leadership coach, facilitator, and strategist of Malaya Solutions. And for those of you who are not Tagalog speakers, Malaya means to be free. Malaya is freedom. So she helps BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color organizations and coalitions. And of course, she is also a fellow podcaster, host of the What We Made Possible podcast. So welcome, Patty, to Transit Thursdays. I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you, Didi. That's the first time that someone has introduced me as a podcaster. So I'm like all smiles right now. I'm like, oh yeah, that's like a new identity for me. It's cool to hear.
Yes, and why not claim it? So you're here and you're doing podcasts, so you're a podcaster.
That's right.
So we're here to talk about, it's not about me. I know you were a pivotal force in my dark ages, but I wanted to invite you to share about your journey of how you found light for your and continue to find light for yourself through like many losses. And one thing I've learned being an immigrant myself and being Filipino American, while I was born and raised in the Philippines and moved here, how was the lived experience of being like Asian American, specifically Filipino American? Because I find there's really like that clash of cultures that kind of sometimes gets you in dark places. That's like, how do I live with this reality of me being both Filipino and American?
Yeah, such a rich question. So I grew up in a Filipino household in Filipino communities in Jersey City and Belleville, New Jersey. Now I live in Newark, but I grew up in a multi-generational household. My parents' house was like the first stop for anyone coming from the Philippines. It was that kind of soft landing space for, titas, titos, cousins who were new to
Mm-hmm.
the US. And so my house was almost this like landing place for that really big transition. And it was within, again, diverse neighborhoods in Jersey City. At one point, I think Jersey City was named like the country's most diverse city. There's a Manila Avenue here. And so I didn't realize how small and connected the community was until I went to college in New York City. And I grew up 30 minutes from New York.
Yeah, it's just a
Uh
train ride away.
yeah, truly. And so even during college, I was doing kind of intercollegiate organizing. I was a national director for this organization called Find, which put together all of these conferences and dialogues for Filipino American student organizations all along the East Coast. And so I was very much connected to that community all throughout. I was also a dancer throughout college, which, kept me connected. And so when it became time to build a career, I wanted to work with Asian Americans, but those opportunities were pretty few and far between. There's
Mhm.
few organizations that are large enough to have, extensive staff where you can make a career out of doing work with Asian Americans. I even, wrote my master's thesis about data disaggregation for Asian Americans and how each community has very diverse and various challenges, including poverty, which at the time was really difficult to do. One, because it was hard to find a mentor
Mhm, mhm.
to help me with this thesis who actually knew about this challenge. And I was doing a lot of education to that mentor. He was great, but he was also a white man,
Yeah.
And then the way that I did end up kind of like working in community for, I think it was like 5 years or so, was that I was able to connect with a Filipino professor who then got me connected to organizations who are doing like public health work outside of like academic institutions. And I ended up working as an advocate. I was standing on the steps of City Hall organizing rallies. I was talking about the model minority myth. We were doing data disaggregation work, but it was really tough. This
Yeah.
was, pre Stop Asian Hate. This was before any real attention was paid
Mhm.
to Asian American mental health at the collective level. And so our organizations at the time were under a lot of strain. We were doing budget advocacy because I think the way that we were framing our movement at the time was we are 15% and growing of the city of New York,
Mhm.
15% of the population. But we would look at, budgets and how much of money that was being dispersed to community through different outreach programs and direct service funding and all of that. I think it was like less than 1% was going towards a community. And New York City has a almost $1 trillion, but it has a billions of budgets of dollars in its budget. And so the organizations that I was part of were really unstable and they
Mhm.
were always under strain. I worked at a coalition where we had 5 executive directors in 4 years. And so the experience of being an Asian American, trying to work in community, trying to like make a difference and like make a career out of it was actually quite challenging.
And what's interesting is I find that you, because of your like centricity and the lived experience of being in the community, like you recognize there's a lot of lost opportunities for people like us. But at the end of that spectrum, there's like light that, there is something that we can tap into. And I find it interesting that the person who like kind of shepherded you towards that is also a fellow Filipino who
Mhm.
kind of like saw and recognized that opportunity. Like, yes, we need help. Yes, these are the challenges. So, because I kind of know where you can tap into, like, I will kind of point you to the right direction.
Yeah. And it wasn't just that person, right? I kind of
Mhm.
like, for as many jobs that I've had throughout the years, and I, in human design, am a 6'2", which means that in my first, 27 or so years of life, I was just like kind of bumbling through and doing
Mhm.
something I was doing something different every year. But once I landed in this place where I was doing advocacy with Asian Americans, I stayed. I stayed a while. And part of the reason is because I had a great mentor and supervisor within that organization where we had 5 EDs in 4 years. The rest of the team was pretty stable for the most part, and we stuck together. Actually, that same supervisor is the person who introduced me to coaching.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Hi.
she was training to be a coach on her lunch breaks. And so I overheard her in conversations coaching people. And I was like, what are these conversations? What are you telling people to do? And like, how can I be part of that? And how can I have access to that? How can I do that myself? And one of the kind of breaking points, or maybe not breaking points, turning points for her and for our community was when Trump got elected in 2016.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because the day after the election, the Wednesday, right? Hillary Clinton gave her concession speech.
Mhm.
He gave his acceptance speech. We were actually in a meeting to celebrate. The intention of the meeting was to celebrate the passing of a data disaggregation bill in New York City.
Mhm.
So we had been fighting for years and years and years for this bill to pass. And that was supposed to be a celebration for our coalition and our members. But it felt like the day after 9/11. New York City felt so somber that day. And it became almost like a rift, or it created this rift between people who were like, oh my God, I need to double down on my work. I'm going to continue all of this. I need to double down with fundraising. Like, our community is going to need us more than ever. And then my supervisor at the time and other people were on the other side of this, where they were saying, oh my gosh, this is going to get really difficult, even more difficult than it has been.
Mhm.
And I'm already burnt out.
Mhm.
So I need to get out of here and figure out what else I need to do. How else can I support community? Because it's not this way.
Mhm.
And
Where were you in that like polarity?
that's a good question. I think listen, I was pretty early on in my career. I was working at that organization while I was in graduate school. And at the same time, I was like, I needed stability.
Mhm.
And so there was no way that I could see on the side of I need to double down, because I needed stability. And if our communities needed us more than ever, but the funding was not there, then how was I going to survive?
Mhm.
And so I was like, I I kind of went the other way. It took me some time. I
Mhm.
left that organization in May of 2017, so a little less than 6 months after that. And I went to the place that was most stable, which is government. But
Mhm.
my first day of work in government was also my first day of coaching training. So I
Mhm.
did DEI within government and on Broadway at the same time that I was building a coaching practice.
Yeah, and that's where our paths actually crossed.
Correct? Yeah.
And it's really interesting your journey because it's like there's no separation between you and community. Like you want to give back and you also get support from the community. Like it's a circle of life that revolves around it. like you're coaching what you do, and you're able to feed on, no, I don't like though, it's not feed, but gain both strength and find like lights within. You're really plugged in a way with a community, like you feel the losses hard, and that's why you want to give back more, because you understand and feel what it's like to be in their shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was in college, I worked at the time it was called the Center for Service and Justice. And
Mm.
the people that I worked with were very progressive, very social justice oriented. We had trainings from the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, like very organizer heavy. And in that office, there was a sign or a poster of this quote. This quote was from Leela Watson, and she said, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." And that to me was so, like, that made so much sense to me. Like, I'm part of community, so I need to contribute to community. And yes, I'm going to benefit as well, like, in the way that, like, I could make a career out of it, I could survive off of it, I could personally grow in this way, I get personal satisfaction out of the work. But I'm learning more and more that it's a give and take, but that's what is required for reciprocity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's just like, yeah, I'm part of the system. Like, I'm of this community. I am part of this community. My house was a community, right? My partner's home growing up, same thing. Like, their house was the same kind of landing place for family members immigrating to the US from Jamaica. And so, like, for both of us, like, we are from this community. I feel like I've said that so many times, but it feels so
Yeah, it feels
uh,
integral to who you are,
yes.
and like growing up in such a multi-generational and like transitional household. There's this, the background helps you, like, you understand the situation and you help people who are in transition to this new life from
Mhm.
where they came from, which I find is what coaching is. Like, I am familiar with what coaching is, but for those who aren't, could you like help define what coaching is? Because I find that it's really one of the many tools that people can tap into when they find themselves in moments of loss, or like me, the dark ages, and trying to
Mhm.
find their way again, trying to find that light in themselves and where they're going.
Yeah. So to me, the way that I talk about coaching is that it's a process to help you act and be in basically a different person, a different version of yourself without having to think about being that person or new
Mhm.
version. And it's different from therapy or counseling or consulting or mentoring in the sense that a coach holds the space for the vision that you create. And on the days that it doesn't feel like you can do that, I'm the person that helps you copy and paste like the vision onto your current day to
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
Therapy, I would say, and I'll say therapy and coaching have very similar tools. And very often when I'm in a coaching training, there are therapists in those spaces, and they're bringing it back to their therapeutic practices. From my understanding and my experience of therapy, it is about healing. And it's almost like past focus. Like, a lot of the questions are like, why am
Why?
I, like,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
did
yeah,
I
yeah.
get here? Why am I here?
What happened to
Whereas,
you before?
Correct.
that got you here? Why do you feel this way?
Yes, especially talk therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for example, like parts work or somatic work, a therapist will use it to answer that question of like, how do we heal a past version of you so that you
Mm-hmm.
can feel
Mm-hmm.
better today? Coaching is how are we going to, look at the body currently right now? Like, what is the memory here right now? And that's a metaphor, right? Like, not a physical memory
Yeah.
of, say, your inner child. And how is that going to help you to unlock the thing that you're trying to move forward to?
Yeah. That's what I noticed. Like coaching is more, okay, we're here. You're at a crossroads to get to where you want to be. It can be both like, is this still what you want? What do you want to do? Do you move forward or do you like step back and recalibrate? It's always like forward looking versus you're shepherding the client, the coachee, to where they want to be and hold
Right.
space. I think the more important is to hold space in the now because, getting to the future is not easy.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
easy. And
Yeah.
like, you've gone through a lot of like clients with different, what kind of losses have you seen like your clients like go through? What are like, is there like something that a kind of situations that you attract as a coach, like most
Mm.
clients that come to you, like what kind of like metaphorical, again, the loss can, some people are intimidated by the word loss because it can mean, when you say loss, it's like a devastating loss all the time, but it can be a small, losing a penny versus losing $1 million,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. When I hear loss, I think of like what's been taken from us,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And because I work mostly with folks of color, immigrant communities, I work with some indigenous folks as well. And we think about what has been taken from us. It's at that systemic level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our humanness, our humanity has been taken from us. Our agency has been taken from us. Our opportunity, our generational wealth, our confidence has been stripped because we've been put into this box of this is who you are, and you are not allowed to be this
Mm-hmm.
other thing that we are allowed to be because we get to be individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that shows up, particularly for new leaders and for the folks that I see, is it shows up like imposter syndrome.
Mm.
It shows up like not having the confidence or like seeing the power within yourself that the person who promoted you sees in you. Very
It's a lot of
often,
self-worth,
correct.
self-worthiness, like worthiness.
Yes. Yes. And the worthiness piece is it's habituated. It's a
Mm-hmm.
habit, right? And it's a habit because these things have been taken from us, right? It's all internalized oppression,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we work on in my coaching is in what ways are you in what ways do you believe in yourself? In what ways do you have that self-worth already? And how can we grow what is there?
Mm-hmm.
It's this very like strength-based approach as opposed to, consulting or mentoring where they're trying to like give you something.
Mm-hmm.
Like a mentor will say like, "Well, this was my experience. Do what I did."
Mm-hmm.
Whereas coaching is like holding space for, again, one of my teachers calls it like the copy and paste.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what I like is like you still, in a way, it's a mirror holding exercise that you hold up that mirror, and I know my Filipino listeners will resonate with this like image, but that's an insider joke. But mirror holding is like, see for yourself how powerful, and you have your own like strengths, you have your own like the light in yourself, and it's kind of you're helping them see that, and help them to take steps towards even as basic as, I think it's underscored how powerful is acknowledging, simply acknowledging that, hey, this is me. I have these strengths. I have these unique gifts. Like
Yeah.
it's just simple, but we underscore how life changing that is for many people, especially BIPOC like
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. I one of the metaphors that one of my clients early on in my coaching practice said to me was that when we first started working together, they felt like the leaves and the branches of a tree, just kind of like moving with wherever the wind is going.
Mm-hmm.
So by the end of our coaching engagement, they were like, "Oh, I feel like the roots. I feel like the trunk where I'm more grounded in like myself. And
Yeah.
whatever is happening externally, the wind, the rain, whatever, I'm still me. And there's a new sense of agency and a new sense of power in that for individuals and for organizations that I work with."
Yeah. And I think what's unique to you, I know we started in an individual coaching relationship, and you've moved towards like bringing this individual coaching to a bigger platform. And it ties into, being growing up in community, and you're still like bringing the coaching to not just to individuals, while that of course service is still available, but you brought it to like a bigger platform for people like us to be steadfast in those roots. I also like the analogy, like, you know to and how is that like different, how does it feel, and like how has working with community for the past years like help spark like light in the feeling of collective loss with all
Mm.
that's recently been happening, still happening, and there are really big changes, not just in the US but in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. When we met each other, I was calling myself a self-love coach.
Mm.
And the reason why that was really what I was leading with was because my first experience of shifting from the leaves to the roots was my own kind of self love journey. And I'm sure I've shared this story with you before, but it was really because I was in a multi-year situationship and then found myself in emergency surgery on my 25th birthday, and this person did not show up for me. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for love with this person and it's just not available here. But that doesn't mean that it's not available to me and that I don't deserve it. That means that this is just not the place that
Mhm.
I'm going to find it. And that was the first boundary that I held, and like the first time I like really chose myself. And self-love was really that kind of like stake in the ground, that transition
Mhm.
from the leaves to the roots. And so when I started coaching people through, all the different circumstances of loss, of challenge that had them kind of waving in the wind,
Mhm.
so many of them, the root was their work,
Mhm.
that it was exhausting them, that it was not what they wanted to do, that they wanted to do something that was more impactful, more satisfying to them, more community connected, right? And then even the people within community, people working within, say a nonprofit, for example, something that is mission based, they were still unlearning all of the stuff that they had from previous toxic experiences.
Mhm.
And so I started working with individual leaders. And then once I told everyone in my network that I was going to coach full time, which was early 2023, there was this flood of people who I knew from past lives, right? When I was working with DEI, when I was working on nonprofits, those colleagues all were like, "Oh, we were just looking for a coach for our teams." And so
Oh.
I kind of stumbled into it, very generator like. And I ended up working with either individuals within a larger system where when we are coaching, it's not just about your individual, emotions, your individual actions, your individual goals. But I also found that when we were setting our goals, it wasn't about like, oh, my own health, my own like self-love, my own relationship with myself, my own relationship with, a partner, whatever. It was very much like, no, I want to feel more grounded so that I can show up for my community better. That was the key for so many people, was that they wanted to continue to show up, but they wanted to do it more sustainably.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I'll work with individuals within a system, and then part of how they show up in that system is part of our coaching. So we'll have goals around like, how do you up manage, or how do you navigate this particular relationship with this partner, or how do you navigate funding challenges? And then I also work with groups of people doing facilitation and workshops, and that's really holding space for the system, for the group, because there's an energy that's like this entity that gets created by the group energy that is not owned by any single person. So you're coaching that energy as opposed to any individual within it. So it's a really interesting growth point for me. And I've found that there is this kind of ripple effect.
Yeah.
When the leader is, feeling more healed, feeling more whole, feeling more empowered, they have more agency, then they can show up for their team better. And then team is, those relationships strengthen. When that team's relationships strengthen, their external relationships strengthen. They're able to do their work in more community, more sustainably, in a stronger way. They're more aligned with their values. And then that is really the impact. So even if I'm working with one individual, really I'm working within all of the nested systems that they're part of, or I'll work with the systems themselves.
Which is very interesting because I know, like, I hear a lot of cliches are cliches because there's some truth to them. And I find that, the saying that you light the little candle in your small corner and it will like shine the light on everybody. It's kind of what you're doing, that when you start with, just one little candle and like everybody will see the light and see that, hey, maybe I can, when they see the shift from this one person, then it impacts them and like, maybe I can do it differently. And then when you bring it to like a bigger level in a group, in an organization, then that's like, okay, we see this now and we can all work to do it better. Like, but you recognize that, we've all lost some part of ourselves, some part of the community, some part of the organization within the system. And we know that this can't continue anymore. And we have to find our way out of it in one way or another. And I think that's like kind of like beautiful. And I've not attended like something like that on a group level, but I could imagine how it can be like very powerful for people in, communities who have experienced so much, loss, and like in themselves and in their own confidence, and like with resources and everything else, and how empowering it could be.
Yeah, one of the biggest losses that I see among communities right now is obviously all of the people and really like all of the people from their communities during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and a loss of our previous life
Mm-hmm.
pre-COVID. So many of the organizations that I work with started because of that loss, because of the need in community and need for a culturally specific resources, right? In language, or if we're talking about food distribution, that it's food that community is actually going to eat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so many leaders, they're navigating that loss, and they're some of them are coming into community work for the first time, or they were doing community work and now they're voluntold into a leadership position and never got to have that training, right? And so speaking of loss, right? Like you get into this position, but you've been pushed into it.
Yeah.
And so you have to be responsive, or you
Mm-hmm.
had to at that moment. And now a lot of them are sitting here, 5 years later, either continuing to do this work, but being like, oh, like, let me take a step back. Like, do I want to continue to do this? Am I just here because I was kind of led here?
Mm-hmm.
And if I am choosing it, then how do I want that to look for myself? And how do I want to contribute to community,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like without having to do all of the things
Mm-hmm.
and burning out and like losing our life force, right? How do we continue to do that?
Yeah. And it's beautiful too, because, being in community for BIPOC, it's innate in us, for good or for bad. Sometimes it can be too much when, your community is in your face all the time. We all know that, but it comes naturally. Like, we recognize that, like, our cultures, and we grew up like in a village. So we understand that, it takes a village to survive, basically. And to survive, and hopefully with some coaching, you help transition and move from basically just surviving, but really, thriving as an individual in the community, and hopefully helping the community thrive together as well.
Yeah. Yeah. The word that's coming to me in terms of loss and, connected to this idea of being rooted regardless of what's happening,
Mhm.
the word that's coming to me is resilience. But I was co-facilitating a retreat recently, and one of the participants, who's an elder
Mhm.
within community, said, I am so sick of having to be resilient. I'm so sick of being called that, because that means that we had to experience all of that hardship and loss.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the response that kind of came about in that moment, because one thing that I'm learning with coaching groups of people and systems is that systems are naturally intelligent. There's this natural wisdom. And so when this leader said that, there was almost this opening up of like, well, you don't have resilience, and the strength that is required is challenging because it feels like you are the one who has to hold it all yourself.
Mm.
But when we're in community and we can all hold it together, and we can hold, like, I can hold you up, you can hold me up. Like, we only have to hold our piece, and the piece that actually we are the most satisfied, and it is the most life-giving to us to be able to contribute. When everyone is able to do that, then the strength that's required for resilience is so much less.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a reframing of what resilience means. It's like, you're not in it alone. You're not supposed to hold it all alone, but, you know, you're supposed to do your part, because we're all part of that, like, big puzzle big, like, interconnected web of humanity in the end. So I think this is a good, like, place where to kind of wrap up our conversation. And given that, do you have any, like, further, I mean, we've talked about so much. Do you have any, like, advice for people who are, in this space of in between transitioning and trying to move towards, something new, advice, and to people who are trying to find, lights in the losses in their life?
Hmm. Yeah. There's two things come to mind. One is when when you experience a loss, it feels like all the light has been sucked out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that's not necessarily true, right? It's just taking up so much of your kind of attention, and rightly so, right? Like sometimes that loss, if it's really big, then it can leave like a big hole in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
But in that moment of loss, there is still light. And so I think what I'm trying to say is like find what that is, even if it's tiny, and allow it to like light up that space again. The darkness, right? Like kind of ask yourself what else is here? What else is true, right? And then the second piece is that all healing, I believe, happens in community. Because one thing that happens when we are experiencing loss, when we're experiencing grief, when we're experiencing shame, right, is that we isolate. And so, tell somebody, like put yourself in community, even if you don't have to talk, right? Like go to a yoga class, be around other humans, just like
Mm-hmm.
be around other people's nervous systems and allow their light to come into you. Yeah.
That's true. And I want to end with, I don't know, I might butcher the quote, but when no one is free, then everyone is not free. I'm butchering the quote, but
Mm.
there's that quote that I always try to remember, like, when just we need to free ourselves. So everybody, when one person is not free, then everybody else is not free. So we need to, like, free ourselves from that, work towards freeing ourselves from whatever that shackles you. And it's important that we recognize that, you're not alone. And I think that is what you do. And I really appreciate you and your work for bringing, the coaching, much needed for the bigger community, because it's something that is needed, especially during this, like, very in transition times. So thank you, Patty, for being here with me and speaking and talking about your valuable work. Do you have any projects ongoing and upcoming, and where people can find you if they want to connect with you, on a individual level, or connect their organization and community with your work?
Yeah. So my podcast is, I would say, the first thing to follow. My podcast is called What We Made Possible. And the way that you can hear from me more intimately about any opportunities to work with me is through email. My email list, as we are recording right now, it's called A Sunday Kind of Love, but I'm also in the middle of a rebrand. So by
Mhm.
the time this episode comes out, the email list is going to be called The Possible Within Us. So that is the best place to kind of, hear more from me and to learn about how we can work together.
So thank you. And I hope that you find Patty and her work. And I must say that as a former coachee, she's one of the best. And I will share a personal story to wrap it up, like how powerful, like that simple holding space is for like a person, like when she was there in one of the really dark moments, and she just, I wasn't saying anything on the other line, but she was just there. I think it was like 20 minutes of me not talking, but she held her like ground, and she was there to listen. That's the kind of like coaching that Patty will give you and your community. So I have the stamp of approval. So highly recommended. But thank you so much for joining me. And I hope that you listeners have learned, a different approach on how to find your light through in loss. So thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you again in the next episodes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Didi. Always an honor. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to What We Made Possible. I really hope this episode resonated. As a coach, I always end with action steps, and so I invite you to do something, which is to pause and ask yourself, what resonated? What am I taking away? And what's possible for me and my community now? If you liked this conversation, please leave a review and a rating. It helps so much. Thanks again.